So some of you are having issues with the assignment. A couple quick tips that I'm going to do, and I thought maybe what I don't normally do, and a little concerned, because you don't physically get to ask questions and that sort of thing. I thought this would be beneficial for me to go through typesetting the first page and kind of reinforcing the idea of special characters and page numbers. So um, once you have InDesign open, you first need to create a new document. So just to review that, file new, document. Not very different than any of the other programs. Um, I need to, I already gave you the exact dimensions. In the past, I had students actually have to measure and figure all that stuff out themselves, but I'm not going to do that to you, or I've stopped doing that, make it a little bit easier. I'm going to go to picas. I need to make sure these are inches so that I make sure my numerals are correct. I'm going to do 10 by 10 inches. There's 4 pages you have to create, so 4 pages is a good number to have it set. And instead of having facing pages, I have this unchecked so that I see single images. I'm going to start on page 1. That's what the start number means, starting with page 1, on page 1. And this is because you could start on page 45 if you're laying out a book that's developed, designed, or broken up into sections or anything like that. I'm going to change my columns, make sure they're 3. My column gutter is at 0.25 inches. Again, I would tip, in the past I had students figure that out. Margins are 0.25 inches for top, bottom, left, and right. I'm going to hit create, and it should look something like this. 4 pages, my page panel is already up. If you don't see that, you can always click on it. Again, you can say you can specify that you want your stuff Essentials Classic, or you can find your page numbers under Windows to pop up that tab. Multiple ways of accessing everything. So before we begin, I'm going to first place the first image on that first page. And this is pretty much identical to what we did in Illustrator, where in Illustrator we dropped an image of those shapes that I provided to you. So we're going to go to File, Place, and I'm going to grab that first one. And what happens is it shows me a thumbnail of what the image is going to be. And these images, I intentionally designed them so that they're 300 dpi and so that they are the identical size to your page. So all you have to do, and the idea is to make it as easy as possible while we're learning. Next project will be a little bit more complicated, a little bit more creative. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to go and click in that top left corner, and immediately it drops it in the exact size. And you can see it because of these boundaries. You don't click on anything here. You don't have to. Now, to prevent when I'm doing my type over top of this, to make it a little bit easier, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my effects, which you can also find through the drop-down menu, effects. And I'm going to go to the opacity and reduce it so that it's not as intense. Now, your image might be a little bit less crisp than what you're seeing on mine, and that's because your view options are perhaps different. So I'm going to go to View and show you where that is, Display Performance. Now, under Typical Display, it's a little bit pixelated, and the idea is to save processing power for your memory, and that's the default. If you want to see what you're doing a little bit clearer, you can go to Display Performance under View and change that to High Quality Display. That makes it a little bit more crisp. I also, so I can't accidentally move this image like this, I'm going to go to Object Lock. Now, I need a text box to place my text. So I'm going to, but before I do, I want to go over page numbers one more time. And it's a similar process in the master pages. Under Pages, there's a master. I go over this in the other video, so if you haven't yet, look at that video. And I'm going to double click on a master. And I'm going to need to draw a text box. But before I do, I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to go to File, Place, and place that first image on there. Now, once this image is here, I'm going to use that number 1 as a guideline, and that's why I placed it, because it's going to make things a little bit easier for me to make it accurate. So I'm going to click on the Type tool and draw something approximately that size of the number 1. Now we're going to do what we call inserting a special character. Now, what special characters, they do a lot of different things. What we're going to do is page numbers. Page number special character can be the current page number, and that's the one that we're going to do. And what's going to appear when I do it, I'm going to go to Type, Insert Special Character, Markers, Current Page Number. What's going to happen when I click on this is I get a letter A. The letter A is a variable that means every single current page number. So because I'm doing this on the master page, as I went over in the other video, anything that happens on the master page happens on all the pages. So this letter A, and I'm going to keep it over here just so you can see, when I double click on page 1, it becomes a 1. On page 2, a 2. On page 3, a 3. And I double click on page 4, a 4. Now, going back to the master page, I need this in the correct location and also the correct typeface. So you can't just put a letter A here. It has to be defined as the special character option through this process right here that I'm demonstrating again. But you can change the typeface. You can change the color, you can change the style, you can change a lot of things, and it will make the page numbers look like that. Like I said, everything is Helvetica, so this is obviously bold, so Helvetica bold. And then you're just going to move, I'm using my arrow keys now, to move that letter A over, and then if I double click on page 1, page 2, I'll see the 2, but I also see the poem, and page 3, 3, 4, so on and so forth. Now I'm going to go back to my master page, and because I don't need this as a guide anymore, I double clicked to go to my master page. And if you're having trouble being able to recognize whether or not you're on your master page or not, or on one of your regular pages, an easy way to do it is to check down here. It says A master, and that lets me know that I'm on the master page. So I'm going to click on that, hit delete. Now only the page numbers are on those, except for page number 1, where I placed the image. So now I'm going to create a text box to lay out this type. I'm going to go to the letter T. This is the type tool. And I'm going to click on that column and drag out. And again, with the poems, they might not adapt. Like, as you can see, the word like goes beyond the column. But the Frederick Douglass essay does adhere to these columns. So just for future reference. All right, so I'm going to now go to my text document, and you can find it in that zip file. It's labeled text.txt. It's a generic type option, so it should open on any computer. And I'm going to click and highlight my poem and copy and paste. Now again, I'm doing this because I don't expect you to write everything from scratch. That'd be a little bit cruel. I'm having you just paste all this content in. So I go back to my text box, and when I hit Command V, the entire poem is now in there. Now it's just a matter of styling the type so that it correctly accommodates this information. Now I gave you a variant of Garamond that you can utilize. You might have a different variant. I believe that I used the Garamond Pro for this originally, but any form of Garamond is going to work. It's going to maybe be a little bit different, which you can make some adjustments anyways, and can be useful in accommodating this. So I'm going to go to, I'm going to highlight everything first and make it all Garamond. And then I'm going to highlight the first line, and that first line is bold. And I'm going to start increasing the size. Now, that's too big, right? 16, between 16 and 17 is pretty close. Now what's great about type is that you can actually change the numbers using decimals. So I'm going to try 0.25, and that's much closer. So it's almost identical to the size that I need. Now with the name of the author, I'm going to need to make that italic, obviously, and I'm going to increase the size. Now, the e's are a little bit different than the e's that I'm seeing displayed in the image, but you can, that's okay. Don't be stressed out. I must have used a different style of Garamond initially. So, and you can still mess around with tracking to get these a little bit more accurate. So between the E and the C, I'm going to utilize, with my cursor there, I'm going to utilize my kerning option. That's the V/A. And I'm going to reduce some of that kerning so that that italic type fits a little bit better. I'm going to then, the entire word, the INGS, I'm going to use with several highlighted, you can see now I can't manipulate my kerning, but I can manipulate my tracking. That's the VA with the arrows underneath. And that allows me to open up those last few letters. Now it's just a matter of hitting return and adjusting some of the leading and tracking and kerning again. So I'm going to hit return, and I see that the line is on the incorrect line. Now you don't want to use the baseline shift. This is going to make things a little bit more complicated. You want to use the leading over here, the two A's, one stacked on top of the other. Now even if there isn't anything visibly on this line, if I click and highlight, you can see there's actually a space. And InDesign considers spaces characters, because they are technically characters. When you bought lead type, you would get a piece of lead that was specific to that typeface that was that typeface's specific spacebar, in the context of, to relate it digitally, but it wasn't, spacebar was actually a piece of lead. So you can either highlight the entire word, and as you can see, or entire line, excuse me, and as you can see, I included the space as part of that selection. This allows me to then manipulate the leading. Now the only way I can affect it and it won't affect all the lines of type is if there's a return. I'll show you that in a second. So I just now, that line is perfect. If I just have this cursor here and start affecting the leading, see it's not really, doing anything. You have to have that return at the end to kind of sever the relationship. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start laying this out. It ends on rain. I can use my space bar, or I can use the paragraph option to do a shift. And all I'm doing is just basically using my return and space bar key to lay out all this type. And the reason I chose Cummings poems to begin with is because they have a tendency to make the way that they approach the lettering and the spacing of their words actually contribute to the poetry itself. So I thought that was an interesting exploration for everyone to be able to do. And all I'm doing is using my spacebar tab key and hitting the return. Oops. And most of my letters already are pretty close, right? It's not super intense. Okay, so there's a couple of areas that are a little bit off. You can always go back and change them. Again, so I can go to this letter E and manipulate the kerning so it's kind of closer in place. Go back to in between my C and move it over so it's more in place. If you were going to do a poem, this might be an important kind of thing to do. But for most type, you wouldn't really be this, intense with your letter spacing. Most type at this size isn't going to be seen, but if you're trying to be fancy with a poem, you can. And all I'm doing is I'm creating negative kerning to make sure that these words are in the correct place. It's not super complicated. You can finish, most of these in less than 10 minutes. You see? And then with this one, all the letters seem a little bit off, even though the T starts in the correct location. So I'm going to maybe, actually with the I is where I'll start spacing that out. And this is close enough. I'm not, if it's slightly off, like you look like you have like a little bit of a drop shadow, that's okay. That's considered fine. That's acceptable for this particular project. In the past, when I was in school, we actually had to measure this all out with a ruler. So we didn't have the opportunity to be able to use the computer and just put it down on here like this. Not to sound like back in my day we walked, both directions uphill in the snow to get to school kind of thing. But yeah, it was difficult. It was a lot more rigorous. But I'm not having y'all do that. Oops. Okay. Just making some very subtle, adjustments. And it's pretty close on my, that's good. Like that's acceptable. And then you have your number. You have this. That should hopefully again help you. And again, I'm sorry that I'm not physically there. It's an unfortunate situation that we have here, but hopefully this will at least clarify some things and help you show the context and allow you to be able to do the others. But again, constantly email me, meet with me in Zoom if you need to. uh, you know we're gonna do whatever you can to communicate so that I can help you as best I can. All right, good luck.